Welcome to the ATP Project. You're with your host, Jeff, and we've got Steve and Elisma with us today, as per usual. Yep. Guys, we're talking about SIBO. So huge area of interest at the moment is in gut health, and so many things happening. But SIBO, I guess, is one of those horrible diseases that if you're afflicted by it or if you've got a family member afflicted by it, there doesn't seem to be a heck of a lot of help out there for a lot of people, or so they think. So SIBO stands for, you want me to say it? I'm not the scientist, but small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
That's it.
Right, there we go. So SIBO. Because when I first heard that, it's funny because I remember watching, what's that show where they get all those investors on? And
Shark Tank. Love Shark Tank.
And there's a guy there called Steve Baxter, who actually lives in Brisbane here where we're from. So American viewers would know the Shark Tank. We've kind of got one over here with Aussies as well too. And it's so funny because there was some guys presenting some of their product and they were going, and this is SIBO friendly. And he goes, SIBO? And this is, mind you, a couple of years ago. He goes, what's SIBO? He goes, you're just making this stuff up, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, no, SIBO is real.
It's real.
And it's a real problem for a lot of people.
It's first published in 1969, the year I was born. That's how old it is.
Wow.
Really old.
Really old. Back when the dinosaurs were in the Steve.
Yeah, I know. There was a paper where they're on T-Rex and what it does too. So that's the era that we're talking. So SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, as you correctly point out. And we've got a small intestine, we've got a large intestine. The small intestine comes first. It's about 30 feet long or about 10 meters. Then you got a large intestine. It's about a meter. The large intestine is where most of your microbes hang out.
Right.
Sometimes they grow into the small intestine. There's supposed to be some there, but not a lot. And if there's too many, they call it an overgrowth. All sorts of things cause this overgrowth. It's predominantly a bad diet, bad lifestyle. And that's because if you have a lot of, say, carbohydrate sugars, they go through the stomach into the small intestine, stimulate the growth of microbes, and we get an overgrowth. And that's a start, and there's also antacids cause it and all sorts of things. And it causes massive, terrible symptoms. I know Elisma's got a list of symptoms there she'd love to run through as a clinician.
Absolutely, because a lot of people don't know that they do have SIBO, right? Because it's very underdiagnosed, I guess, in the common medical kind of community. If with gut specialists, they can kind of like diagnose it pretty easily, but there's some very telltale signs that put SIBO kind of like separate from other gut-related disorders. So some of the typical gut symptoms that you get with SIBO is what you get with other things as well, such as, abdominal cramping, bloating, chronic constipation and or chronic diarrhea. Burping or reflux after meals is a big one. So often people with SIBO get these digestive upsets, the burping and the bloating, usually within an hour after eating. That's a pretty telltale sign of SIBO as opposed to IBS or something else going on.
Do you know what percentage of the population has it, and or what percentage of the population maybe has it but doesn't know it? Do you have any information on that?
Well, about 25% they say, but a lot of it's undiagnosed because you've got, as you say, you've got
25%.
Yeah,
but
that's
that must
huge.
be on a scale, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like there might be relatively minor,
correct,
sort of, bit of discomfort, a bit of burping, or what have you, right through to, you're in trouble.
I know, and that's it. And the problem with this is it's very undiagnosed, because if you had a bit of constipation or a bit of diarrhea, you wouldn't go, oh, that's SIBO, and get a hydrogen breath test or a methane breath test, which is that's how you diagnose it. Okay. Or even more fun, you can get a needle and aspirate into your small intestine and suck out the contents.
I think I might go for the first option, Steve.
Maybe. But the gold standard test is an aspirate of that. Yes, it's terrible.
Anyway, sorry, isn't it? We interrupted while you were going.
That's all right. Some of the other really, really common symptoms is gurgling of the stomach, right? And we're not talking about
hunger gurgles.
Yeah, some people they get constant gurgling of the stomach. Yeah, so that's also a telltale sign. Bad breath is a telltale sign, because it shows you that whatever's happening with your digestive system is higher up, and so you can kind of smell it in the breath. And then halitosis. Halitosis is
just
loving
it's
the
about the only they're throwing the science right out there, right?
Very impressed.
Well, I've got to kind of look like I even deserve to sit at this table with you two guys. So,
But I guess the other big thing with SIBO is there's a lot of systemic symptoms that we never relate to the digestive system. So acne is a very common SIBO kind of like, I guess, symptom. Multiple food sensitivities, depression, anxiety, things like that, weight gain or weight loss, brain fog, fatigue, chronic fatigue.
So it can be hard to nail down because, I mean, you've got weight loss and weight gain, and then you've got diarrhea and constipation. I mean, obviously opposite ends of the scale. So actually diagnosing or running this down, I mean, they're contraindicating sort of issues.
Absolutely. So it can go kind of like either way. And that's why even SIBO gets divided into different categories, right? Really? So you've got SIBO D, which is D stands for diarrhea. SIBO C is for constipation. Then you got then you got the SIBO hydrogen sulfide, which is a fairly new category in the SIBO kind of range.
And what does that denote?
So that's just hydrogen sulfide being produced. So with a SIBO D, that's where hydrogen is produced. SIBO C is where methane is produced, and then SIBO hydrogen sulfide is where hydrogen sulfide, which is like a gas, gets produced, which is very, very toxic to the intestinal cells. And can go on to kind of like damage the migrating motor complex and, cause other kind of like intestinal damage. It's often
the motor complex. What do you mean?
So the migrating motor complex is kind of like a cleansing wave that the small intestines go through. So you have peristalsis, which is the large intestine. That's how we have bowel motions.
Right.
But in the small intestine, you have this migrating motor complex, which is essentially like a cleansing wave where the small intestine, the muscles contract in the small intestine, and it's a wave that goes through that kind of like gets rid of bacteria out of the small intestine. And it occurs every 90 to 120 minutes on an empty stomach. Now, people who constantly eat, constantly graze, they don't give this migrating motor complex a chance to do its job.
Really?
Which is why a lot of people who eat constantly and they don't
bodybuilders. I'll lose the gains. I can feel the gains losing because I need to be drinking, sipping on my branch chains, and
So then, like those kind of people, they're more prone to getting that SIBO.
Well, it's really funny because working with some athletes, some really top notch, fitness, figure, bodybuilding athletes as well too, and one that we're working with consistently went out for a meal one time. And she was just apologizing, going, I'm so sorry. I said, what for? She goes, oh, can't you hear I'm burping? I burp all the time. She just literally burps. Like every couple of minutes it would be like, burp, burp. And I'm like, oh, it doesn't worry me. But, in terms of obviously there was something going on there. Do you think that possibly could be solved?
Absolutely, because that means that there's fermentation happening up in a higher part of the digestive tract.
Yeah.
I mean, usually fermentation lower down, you get more of the flatulence, right? Fermentation higher up, you get the burping. The air has to come out.
Why'd you look at me when you said flatulence?
Steve, everyone in the room looked at you.
Okay.
Yeah, so
jeez.
Light a candle, man. Seriously.
That's right.
Sorry about
but
that.
that's also why a lot of people with SIBO feel better when they don't eat regularly or when they do intermittent fasting. So a lot of people out there who's listening, if you feel better when you actually don't eat or you do the intermittent fasting, that could be a telltale sign.
So this wave, how long does it take?
It lasts, I think it just lasts for a couple of minutes, but it occurs every 90 to 120 minutes.
And what does it do exactly again?
So it's like, the whole digestive system. Well, there you go.
Yeah, I'll do it towards the camera. It's like that. I'm speeding it up. But it's like if you think of the contents being pushed along, if you think you want to push the content that way.
Yeah. Kind of like a caterpillar.
Yeah, like a caterpillar. It pushes it along like that. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it?
It is. It is fascinating because, again, for so many of our people that listen, and especially going back to older school as well too, I mean, specifically bodybuilders and maintaining the gains. It's like if you're not constantly grazing, if you're not constantly like eating all the time, you're not getting enough amino acids into your bloodstream. And, if you're not anabolic, you're catabolic. But it's so funny because in terms of nutrition, digestion, optimum health, this intermittent fasting seems to be coming all the time. Even just the nighttime circadian sort of, okay, stop eating when the sun goes down, don't start eating again until the sun comes up. I mean, the real basic sort of stuff. I mean, again, there is actually wisdom in some of these things, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because, I mean, again, you do more with less.
Yeah.
So if your body's optimally, positioned as far as nutrition and digestion and your hormones and everything's working great, because nothing worse than eating food but actually not being able to digest it properly or creating other issues for you, right? So bodybuilders, stop it.
That's right. And, it's like, and the reason for that migrating motor complex, it pushes the bacteria back into the large intestine. And as Stephen pointed out earlier on, that's where most of the bacteria occur. In fact, the stomach contains less than 1,000 bacteria. The small intestine should be less than 10,000 bacteria, because the stomach and the small intestine is where digestion takes place. That's where you have your stomach acid and your pancreatic enzymes, your disaccharidase enzymes, all the enzymes. That's where digestion takes place, not fermentation.
Yeah.
But in the large intestine, there's usually more than 10 billion bacteria.
Wow.
And that's where the short-chain fatty acids are produced and the fermentation happens. So if the fermentation happens higher up, where digestion is supposed to take place, you get gas. And then that gas is the gurgling in the stomach and the burping.
So with methane, I mean, typically we laugh, we go, oh, methane, it comes out,
Yes.
Greenhouse gas,
Small explosion between the legs,
And
according to the
climate
Oxford
change.
Dictionary. Creates climate change. Okay.
It does.
Yes, it does.
It's a greenhouse gas.
It
It does.
yeah.
So in terms then of methane that's produced in the small intestine, does that come out through your mouth? Like, is that
It does,
burped
yeah.
out?
It does.
That's one of the
Wow.
tests. You can test for a hydrogen breath test or a methane breath test.
Right.
And the methane typically slows down the peristalsis.
So,
I'll call it.
but that would stink, right?
It
That's why
does.
bad breath is a typical symptom.
But do you know
Right,
what's
right.
worse than that? The H2S gas, the hydrogen sulfide gas that we were talking about before. What we
Is
used
that like rotten eggs?
it is rotten egg gas.
It's the fire and brimstone they spoke about in the Bible. Is that
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
It is
The
the pits of sulfur.
Yeah. Brimstone
Absolutely.
breath. Oh,
and
imagine that.
if I can take you back to my high school days in
Yeah.
chemistry, what
Yeah.
we'd do is we get some zinc and quite cheap and put it in H2SO4, which is hydrogen, which is sulfuric acid.
Yeah.
And you just chuck it into a little like ice cream container and leave the room. And the next room that came in, the whole
egg
room,
gas.
it
Yes.
stunk the whole room.
Yes,
I
remember
remember.
that.
And I just got sent to the office for doing that because someone dobbed me in.
Oh,
but
this little
terrible.
snitch, dirty little
I know,
snitch.
but we used to do terrible chemistry things in those
It's
days.
with the old fun with the Bunsen burners. I remember leaving one on one end of the in the science lab,
Yep.
and up the other end I turned this one on, and literally this fireball sort of took off along the back. The sort of stuff we used to be able to see kids. With
Well, that's
fun that we
methane.
used to
I know.
have, hey?
You're burning methane. Natural gas is mostly methane.
There you
Yeah.
go.
That's right.
It's interesting, isn't it? So you get these hydrogen breath tests that you can do. Now, the problem with that is it can be confused with a bacteria that produces hydrogen called Helicobacter pylori.
Oh, I've
or
heard
H.
of that
pylori.
before.
Yeah, it causes
That's a bad
ulcers.
one, right?
It can be. It's in about
Out of
50
balance.
Yeah, out of balance. It's in about 50% of us already. So one of us at this table has probably got it in their gut, and that's fine. It usually
Steve's got
causes
it.
no symptoms. But the treatment for that is triple antibiotic therapy plus antacids.
Wow.
Now the problem with antacids is that they cause SIBO.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So
There's
you're
a
not,
lot of problems with antacids. And the funny thing is in the States as well too, the amount, Steve, I remember way back we were talking about the overuse of antacids. It is literally like having a steaming pile of dog turd on your in your lounge room and going, I'm just going to throw a towel over the top of that so that it doesn't smell and nobody can see it.
Yep.
So, well, how? I mean, but seriously, that's my opinion of
Yes.
using antacids, right? You need to get to the root cause of the problem, right? Because otherwise, seriously, and then another dog does a big turd and then you just throw another towel over the top of that. I mean, it
you're
just
writing
doesn't
this
make
down,
sense.
Elizabeth? Turds.
See,
It's
this
a
is
great analogy.
high science.
Science.
Come to me, I'll help you out.
The thing about antacids is they're more powerful now because you've got these, not just antacids like carbonates that dilute acid, you've got PPIs, which are proton pump inhibitors, which stop the production of H+, which is acid. So it doesn't just antacid, it stops the production of it. And you can take them once a day and it stops production of acid for people on these things for years. And they cause huge side effects, including small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and also has a terrible effect on the stomach. Proton pump inhibitors actually increase gastric cancer of the stomach by twofold.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's quite scary. So because stomach's acid, it's supposed to be there. Now, if acid's not there, you can swallow all sorts of bacteria that can irritate the stomach, and the bacteria or whatever can survive in there because there's no acid to kill it.
Wow.
Because it's part of the immune system, the stomach. Yes, it's great for digestion and unfolding proteins, but it's part of the immune system. So if you switch that off, you're going to get all sorts of things into your small intestine because the stomach's not going to kill it.
Yeah, right.
And then you've got this bacteria all throughout your small intestine.
Wow.
Incredibly dangerous. I've got a paper here on it, and it describes a lot of side effects. And basically, it causes all sorts of digestive issues as well. And you end up with whole foods in your small intestine when they shouldn't be.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
And there's even another mechanism. I'm glad that you use the stomach acid and the proton pump inhibitors it's a nice segue, right? Because then we get to the gallbladder, right? Because we need that stomach acid to create an acidic food bolus. That's just making your food acidic. Then that food moves from the stomach into the small intestine. And that low pH, that acidic pH of the food, then triggers your gallbladder to dump bile into the small intestine to make it more alkaline again. Now, if you don't have that stomach acid, then the gallbladder doesn't get that trigger and bile doesn't get released in the amounts that's needed. Now, that's an interesting thing, right? Because bile acids, they move through the small intestine with the food. And when they get to the ileum, which is the last part of the small intestine, just before it goes into the large intestine, there's a little valve between the small intestine and the large intestine. It's called the ileocecal valve. And it's like a little gate. Sometimes it opens and sometimes it closes, but it separates the contents from the large intestine and the small intestine. It separates the bacteria. It keeps the bacteria in the large intestine so they don't get into the small intestine. Now, you need those bile acids that's combined with the food as it moves down the small intestine to activate these receptors in the ileum that last a little bit right there by the little valve, the ileocecal valve. They're called FXR receptors, the farnesoid X receptors. These are called bile acid activated nuclear receptors. So the bile acids go bind on these, and then that stimulates the cells in the small intestinal wall, the enterocytes, to release antimicrobial peptides that goes and kills off bacteria in the small intestine. The other thing it does is it also upregulates, once these bile acids bind to these receptors, it upregulates an enzyme called INOS, or Inducible Nitric Oxide Synthase. And that INOS is designed to release nitric oxide into the small intestine, which is another antimicrobial compound. Right. So we need we need the stomach acid to trigger the bile release, and then the bile acids go and stimulates the immune system in that last bit of the small intestine to kill any bacteria that may have migrated from that large intestine through that ileocecal valve into the small intestine. So we can see how proton pump inhibitors have this cascading effect right from the top down to the bottom, and how it can trigger SIBO in such numerous ways.
So
incredible.
Sorry, Steve. The question I was going to ask is just comes to mind: people that have had their gallbladder removed.
Yes.
And also, and I also want to know just what the appendix does as well too, because I mean, in terms of things being removed, the appendix outside of the tonsils seemed like almost a rite of passage for kids growing up. It was choose one or the other, right?
That's right.
But in terms of the gallbladder first, what does the gallbladder? If you haven't got a gallbladder, I mean, obviously you've got to make changes to your lifestyle, your diet,
absolutely,
what you eat, and what things you should be adding in.
Yeah, this is the thing. I know that sometimes the gallbladder has to be removed for whatever reason, especially if it's necrotic, if it's undergone necrosis where the tissue is dying, there's nothing you can do about that. Yeah. But in my opinion, a lot of gallbladder removals are unnecessary. Right. They're done too easily these days. Yeah. And every single person that I've ever seen in my clinic who's had their gallbladder removed has had SIBO or gets SIBO or constantly struggles with it. And the reason why is because with the gallbladder, you need this like surge of bile that gets dumped into the small intestine when you eat fatty food. It's triggered in relation to fats, right? Yeah. Now, if you have your gallbladder removed, you still have a bile duct. The bile duct is still sitting there, right? And what happens is now instead of getting like a surge of bile, because that's like a pump, right? Now you just get this drip. Right. And you don't get enough bile acids to kill off bacteria. So what happens is, because you actually need a lot of bile, because what bile acids do is they actually, if there's bacteria in the small intestine, it disintegrates the wall of bacteria. It kind of like punches holes into. It's almost like it's like acid almost. Yeah. So it punches holes, and then the intestines or the contents of these bacteria leak out and the bacteria shrivel up and they die.
Cool.
But now if you don't have enough bile, so it's just dripping out, you almost get the same effect as antibiotics if you have it on a consistent basis. You're making the bacteria resistant because they're not getting a big enough bile surge to kill them, just a little bit. And they're like, oh, okay, no, I'm getting used to this. And so they become more resistant and more resistant and more resistant.
Wow.
And so that's unfortunately what you end up is you just have a continual drip of bile instead of surges when you need it and non-surges when you don't need it. And so it creates a kind of like an antimicrobial resistance.
So for people that have had their gallbladder removed, in terms of what's the thing I'm thinking? Oxbile.
Well, yeah. So it's a supplement. A lot of these people will have to take oxbile for the rest of their life with fatty meals to kind of replace the bile that they not produce.
Can lecithin help or no?
Well, lecithin helps with bile production and the consistency of bile. So it can certainly help and prevent gallstones and stuff like that because it makes it more, but it's not going to, it doesn't replace the pump effect that you get with a gallbladder. But it's still very helpful and it will potentially help in preventing things like gallstones and things like that.
And preventing gallstones, I think a friend of mine used to drink, that was kidney, eat too much cheese and was getting kidney stones. So I'm getting mixed up. But yeah, anyway, they created little calcium balls, which you can actually use sonics and stuff like that to break them apart now anyway, can't you?
That's right.
Okay. So that's interesting with regards to the gallbladder. Okay.
It's scary too because gallbladder removal is very, very common and too common. And you've got to remember the gallbladder also stores the bile that's made from the liver and, of course, concentrates it. So it actually makes it stronger. So it actually works in a way, as Lisma said, that it needs to be squirted out when you eat because you're not eating all the time unless you're a bodybuilder. So we're picking on bodybuilders, don't we? But yeah, you need that concentration. And of course, with this SIBO effect too, it does have systemic effects. And Lisma picked on one part of the brain. And of course, believe it or not, being upset in the stomach can make you unhappy, but it makes you more unhappy, doesn't it? Because it does something to your tryptophan.
Yes, yeah. The tryptophan is a really interesting aspect. In the gut, it's kind of like upregulates serotonin production. So when you have SIBO, what they found is that you've got these enzymes. It's TPH or tryptophan hydroxylase enzymes, which make serotonin. So the TPH enzymes in the gut gets upregulated. So now there's more serotonin being made in the gut. And that usually triggers the diarrhea. It kind of like creates that SIBO-D, the diarrhea SIBO. Yep. There's now increased, bowel motions and things like that. So they found there's a study here, serotonin pathway of tryptophan metabolism in small intestinal bacterial overgrowth that kind of like describes that kind of like process. In the brain, though, it works a little bit differently. So in the brain, you also have these TPH enzymes, tryptophan hydroxylase enzymes, to make serotonin. But there what happens is whenever you have an infection like SIBO, is tryptophan goes down, it goes away from that TPH enzyme to make serotonin, and it goes via another route, the IDO route. And I can't remember what IDO stands for.
Nice, but it turns into quinolinic acid.
Yeah, quinolinic acid, kynurenic acid, but we call it the tryptophan steal. So instead of that tryptophan going down into serotonin, it goes down another pathway. And so a lot of people then get the low serotonin symptoms, low brain serotonin symptoms with a high gut serotonin symptoms. And so they get the depression and the anxiety and the sleeping issues and things like that.
Well, it shows obviously just how, and I think this is the thing about the awareness of gut health is becoming so prevalent now. And I think a lot of people are getting sick and tired of being sick and tired, where they're getting Band-Aids to address major concerns. And I understand that as far as doctors and what have you, they're just using the tools that they have available. They understand obviously the chemistry and how drugs can help to make people feel better. So I understand that. But in terms of, Hippocrates, modern medicine said that, and you correct me where I'm wrong, Steve, but all health starts in the gut. Yeah,
the gut is the seat of good health.
Yeah, there you go.
And that was Hippocrates 300 years BC or something.
Which is interesting. I mean, and again, I appreciate there's needs to be more study on that. And look, the nice thing is for people that are listening to the podcast is that, You two guys are doing a lot of work at the moment with various institutions and other research facilities to look at how we can get a better understanding of gut health and how to look into that. And you guys are specifically working to talk to practitioners, naturopaths and integrated doctors and other things like that, to provide education, information, and potentially even products for that market, which I'm really excited about because the high level of science, and this is the thing with ATP Science, is that we are a science-based company. So I think a lot of people understand, us from a point of view of, performance-based, supplements, but at our heart, really, we want to create products for people that are going to make them live a better life and feel better. And with, I guess, the research that you're doing, it is quite high-end, and so it is really targeted towards those practitioners. So hopefully through that, we're going to be able to help a lot of people going forward. So
absolutely, some exciting stuff happening.
Super exciting.
Yeah.
Super exciting.
It's amazing because, again, we think of the small intestine as, digestive issues. And of course, you mentioned that lady before who kept burping all the time. If she went to a doctor, often they would have been prescribed an antacid.
An acid, yeah.
But it's very scary. But let's say you go to another kind of doctor, a heart doctor, and you're getting, say, heart failure. Okay, would you think of the small intestine when you think of heart failure? No, I would, because there's studies showing that there's a strong association between heart failure and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
The funny thing is,
Amazing,
Steve,
isn't it?
it's the second time, and maybe get into it a little bit more, but the other one that surprised me with regards to heart disease was periodontal, and oral health. So, and maybe that's related. Is it related?
It is related, yeah. Because with oral health, going back to Steve with the proton pump inhibitors and the stomach acid, like Steve mentioned, that stomach acid is needed to kill acid-sensitive bacteria in the stomach.
Yeah.
Now, there's always bacteria in your mouth, right? But now, if you've got periodontal disease or poor oral health, you're swallowing a lot more bacteria, and if you have low stomach acid, those bacteria are not killed off. And then they move to the small intestine. And because you have low stomach acid, there's not enough bile being released to kill off the alkaline-resistant bacteria.
Wow.
And then they just reside there. So oral health is a major contributor / cause of SIBO.
Just a quick one. For food, if you were going to use food to look after your mouth more than anything else, what would be maybe the top couple of products that you'd be recommending?
Well, I know what I would not be recommending is definitely not sugar. Like the bacteria, the bacteria, they multiply within seconds if you have like sugar in the mouth.
Yeah.
Xylitol, I believe, has a suppressive effect on Streptococcus bacteria in the mouth.
Streptococcus is the one that causes.
But I've heard that xylitol can actually have other issues lower in
it can.
If you have too much of it,
right.
Yeah, it can.
But small amount, because I remember there's even chewing gums that use xylitol that actually got a tick from the Tooth Foundation or whatever it was. I don't know. But I mean, and again, it's everything in balance, right? So that's interesting with xylitol. But okay. Because I mean, I always look at things like, again, one of my favorite foods is pomegranates, and the amazing effect that it has on, the
gums. It's very good for the gums.
Very good for the gums, because I know it's also very good for the heart. And again, if you look at that Doctrine of Signatures, I love pomegranate. They're a bastard. Before I actually learned how to open them up, and if you ever want pomegranate, because I use them virtually every day because we've got a history of heart disease in our family, is that the Doctrine of Signatures says that like treats like. So if you look at the carrot, and I know we've said this before, you cut it. It's so funny because you had some people going, a carrot doesn't look like an eye. No, cut it. And inside you actually have a look at it. If you study the inside of a carrot, when you look at it, it kind of looks like an eye, right? Vitamin A, good for the eyesight and what have you. But the chambered fruit like tomato, but also pomegranates are in chambers. And even if you look at the pomegranate, like the little things are like blood cells, right? But you take it, there's some amazing research on pomegranates for arterial plaque and for just looking after the heart. I know that there's nitric oxide, which is again state dependent in the mouth, that comes from having things like the what's that thing, Steve, in the mouth that produces nitric oxide when you need it?
Yeah,
it's destroyed with toothpaste.
Oh yeah, well you need certain microbes in the mouth to produce nitric oxide, and some toothpaste has an antibiotic in it.
But in terms of obviously having pomegranate, I mean, I like that. And also the pericarp and all that, which is the outside, which is really tannin and all the rest of it as well too, if you can take a little bit of that with the white fluff as well. But in terms of for SIBO and for that, is there anything
Flavonoids, I'm a big fan of flavonoids. It keeps the gums healthy. It's antimicrobial as
like
well.
Fruit.
things that you get in your fruits and your vegetables, citrus fruits. There's like tons of fruits and vegetables where you can get all these flavonoids are just a polyphenol.
Right.
It's part of that polyphenol group, and polyphenols, as we know, comes from colorful fruits, vegetables, skins of skins and peels of vegetables. So any kind of like plant-based stuff would absolutely be very, very beneficial, and staying away from the sugars and the processed carbohydrates. It's a great way of kind of like promoting oral health.
And I think this is where, Simon and Drew and those guys who are into a whole plant-based, diet now, what I think part of it becomes with and look, I really appreciate those guys, and obviously, they've changed to a whole plant and no animal proteins for a reason. But I think that is actually probably highlighting the fact that they're actually choosing really good, nutritious food that, for the most part, I think is being removed out of our convenient lifestyle, where we're going for that quick stuff that we can grab quickly, and we're devoid of a lot of those polyphenols and the nutrients that these guys are now purposely, effectively, because they're removing a lot of the other stuff, they're actually eating more of that stuff, which is only going to benefit their health.
Absolutely.
So, and again, where I might digress a little bit from them is I still like lean meats, I still like fish, I still like that sort of stuff. But I think part of the benefit that they get is because they are eating so consciously and eating, obviously, so a good variety of foods. That's probably the average meat eater that grabs a steak and 2 veg, which is probably microwaved, or, there's low nutritional value in that food. They're getting the macronutrients, but the micronutrients aren't probably there. Anyway, exactly I'm digressing a little bit. Steve, you were saying in terms then of heart disease.
Heart disease, absolutely. There's a paper here released from the Journal of the American Heart Association, which is pretty phenomenal, that talks about SIBO relationship with congestive heart failure. The correlation is about 250%. So in other words, you've got 2.5 times the risk of congestive heart failure if you've got SIBO.
Wow.
So it's a huge risk factor. Now, cholesterol is about 1 point something.
Yeah,
so it's more important than cholesterol.
Wow.
So that staggered me, the level. I thought it'd be about 30% or something, but over 2.5 times.
Now, we've done a podcast on sugar, right? And the whole conspiracy around sugar, but that's heart, that's gut, that's so many things, right? Refined sugars are probably one of the big evils, really. I mean, in terms of overconsumption.
Overconsumption, I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I mean, if you go back to sugar consumption 100 years ago, I would be surprised if it's not even less than a 20th in what we're consuming these days. But like I said, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. But the sugar industry is it's massive. It's pervasive in all of our foods, processed foods, and things like that. People really underestimate how much sugar they do consume. A lot of people think, I don't have any sugar, and when you start counting, looking at the labels, you start realizing.
Have a look at tomato sauce.
Oh yeah, huge.
30% sugar.
Yeah,
it's even more.
Well, some of them are the ketchups.
Ketchup, yeah.
Yeah, we consume almost 2 pounds or almost a kilo of sugar each a week per Australians. Now, we might contribute to almost zero of that. So you imagine what other people are doing. But you imagine drinking let's say a litre of Coke a day, 3 cans of Coke a day. It's not unreasonable, is it?
No.
Well, it is for me, Steve. Yeah. I appreciate it.
But
for a lot of people.
Just having your 3 drinks a day, that gives you, that gives you about 200 grams of sugar.
Yeah.
Oh,
just drinking.
That's a whole cup of sugar.
It's a whole cup
serious?
of
that
sugar.
Much?
Yeah, it's 20% sugar. And so you did the maths on that. That's 200 grams. 20%. Wow. Isn't that insane? Now, in the orange juice, even the low sugar one, is 10%.
Yeah, right.
So you could, if you drink a litre of orange juice, and yes, I know it's orange, but it's fructose, it's still sugar.
Yeah.
And so you get a monster amount of sugar. Now, if you go put all that in your stomach, and let's say a lot of people drink Coca-Cola or soft drinks, it gets in your stomach, gets in your small intestine, you will get an explosion of bacteria down there.
Yeah.
And you'll get an explosion somewhere else.
Yes, you will. If you get the SIBO D, you'll get an explosion.
Absolutely.
SIBO D, which is the hydrogen breath test positive one. The methane one is the constipation.
Yep.
So either constipated or your diarrhea, or you've got the H2S smelly one.
Yeah.
So it's quite bad. But another thing, how badly affects this is it can also affect your brain badly. There's a recent meta-analysis now. Now, I know most of us don't know what a meta-analysis is.
Well, tell us, Steve.
A meta-analysis is a massive review of all the studies on this particular topic.
Yep.
So someone spent hours looking at all the literature on this one particular topic, and they found, and I'll quote, a strong association between SIBO and Parkinson's disease.
Wow.
Parkinson's disease. That's the one where where people think, oh, it's the destruction of the substantia nigra. But why does it get destroyed? And that's because the SIBO causes these systemic effects in the body which cause damage to your brain.
Is it to do with the tryptophan steal?
Not tryptophan. This is dopamine, another neurotransmitter.
Okay.
So the dopamine levels start to plummet, and so you can't control your fine motor movements.
Wow.
And everyone, I think most people would know what Parkinson's disease is out there.
I'd say so. You get, it's like the tremors, I think Michael J. Fox is probably one of the most famous actors that people can associate with, at least of our generation.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know the amazing thing about Michael J. Fox is that he's had to quit acting now altogether, which is just such a tragedy because I grew up on Teen Wolf and all that sort of stuff.
Back
Family
to the
Ties.
Future.
The Back to the Future movies are huge.
Classic.
But
One of my favourite ones he did was called Doc Hollywood.
Yes.
You remember that?
that?
I didn't know if you knew that one.
Yes.
Yeah,
That was
great.
Yeah, that
great.
was a good one. But what's amazing about him, and this is strange, is that he can't walk, and obviously he's having problems with his speech now as well too. But he can ice skate perfectly.
Really?
Ah.
Wow.
Is this more of a gliding motion?
No, I don't know. It must activate
know.
different parts of the brain.
Could it be because it's an intention,
I don't know.
an intentional movement? Because Parkinson's is a lot with. I actually
Strange,
have no idea,
right?
but that's
Strange.
very interesting.
Strange.
But things for scientists to try and unlock and go, okay, what is the thing here? But as we like to say, prevention is worth a pound of cure. Prevention, pound of cure. But these sorts of things are really fascinating. And I think in terms of fears for people getting older, now when you're young, you're like, the old saying is if, I give you, you can win an Olympic gold now, but you'll be dead in 5 years. I think everybody took it.
Yeah.
Like the younger generation, it's like you get a little bit older and all of a sudden it's like, no, I don't want cognitive decline and all the rest of it. So it becomes more important. But Parkinson's is one of the great fears in terms of your middle-aged to older people. I mean, there is probably nothing really worse than losing your mind, Alzheimer's, dementias, and even Parkinson's. My grandfather had Parkinson's.
Oh, really?
Horrible disease, yeah.
My grandmother did just before she passed. But can I give you another scary thing too?
Yeah.
It's even more scary. Remember I said the heart disease was 2.5 times and that freaked everyone out?
Yeah.
This is just over 5 times.
Holy cow.
Wow.
Yep, 5 times. It's got a what they call an odds ratio of 5.22 with a p-value. Now, I don't know if we know p-values out there, but the lower the p-value, the more confidence they are in the result. Yeah, more accurate it is.
Yep.
The p-value is less than 0.00001.
Wow.
So that's how strong the evidence is. And that's what meta-analysis do, is they look at all the data. So it's probably one of the most likely causes of Parkinson's disease. And again, that's very recent information, 2021. Got the paper here. It's published in Gut Pathogens.
The more that we go through society and the more that things are becoming stereotyped, everything seems to be going on rails now. There seems to be such little education, information, and discussion around natural health. It seems to be pigeonholed into being irrelevant, which is such a shame. I mean, I'm hearing statistics at the moment that are coming out that are not being shared in the mainstream, talking about associated risks with regards to certain flus that are out there at the moment. And they're showing that weight is one of the massive contributors to the effectiveness of the disease, if that makes sense. Being obese. And it's funny because this is not about fat shaming. This is not about, body type or image. This is about health. And this is where I think a lot of times things can get hijacked. Good things and good discussions can get hijacked because in terms of mortality, being overweight and severely overweight is one of the largest risk factors that you'll have. Now, you tie that back into sugar consumption, you tie that back into diabetes, you put that back into gut health issues, then we're looking at cognitive decline, then we're looking at, and all these things come back to a small amount of prevention is worth a huge amount of cure.
Well, all of those diseases you mentioned, Jeff, are metabolic disorders. So metabolic disorders by definition are lifestyle and diet related. And so, relying on medications for lifestyle and diet-related issues doesn't really make sense in a long-term view.
I hate to say it, but there is a medication for SIBO too.
And how does that work, Steve?
Reflexamine, it's an antibiotic that's taken that is poorly absorbed. So you'd think, well, why would you take this? Because it's poorly absorbed.
Right.
It just goes straight through you, which kills everything on the way through.
Yeah.
And it's been shown to be about 40 or 30-something% effective for treating SIBO.
Yeah.
The only problem is you get rebound growth because you're not treating the cause of it. And so they use it. But again, we tried it against herbal medicines, and the herbal medicines seem to be more effective.
Right.
But the beauty about seeing a practitioner like an Elisma, myself, or Nicole, they actually will give you the herbs and give you the correct diet to follow and lifestyles to fix the cause of it.
Well, I think more and more people are becoming aware that there's not a magic bullet, that it is lifestyle, and that there are things that you can and can't do. Even small changes can make a huge, impact. I mean, you said before, if you've got SIBO, straight away I know that I want to be reducing the amount of sugar that I'm consuming immediately. That'd be number one, specifically refined sugars, that you want to be introducing more polyphenols into your diet. So that's things like, fruits and leafy greens, bitter tasting compounds, which again, we've largely removed out of our diet. We're so conditioned into sweet and, nice tasting. We've removed those kind of vinaigrettes and, those sorts of, what's the other thing that's
lemon juice and hot water? A lot of people used to drink that first thing in the morning.
Yeah,
stimulates digestion.
What about the old one, apple cider vinegar?
Yes.
Yeah, that sort of stuff is good as well too, right?
Yep.
So these and just get the old school apple cider vinegar going.
Yep.
What about kombucha and stuff like that? Do you have a problem with kombucha?
Kombucha in general is great, right? It's a fermented drink, lots of health benefits and things like that. But this is the interesting thing, right? So this would be a classic telltale sign for someone who's got SIBO. Generally, people with SIBO don't do well with any fermented foods. Even though fermented foods in general are quite healthy, sauerkrauts and kombuchas, they will typically feel worse when they have sauerkraut or kombucha or any of those fermented
bacterial
foods.
Load's too high?
Because there's too much bacteria in the small intestine and you're just adding to it. And for that reason, they also usually feel worse on probiotics. So things that you would think would be good for you, they feel worse on, and that's a telltale sign that you possibly have SIBO.
And look, this is the thing as well too that we're obviously huge advocates of, is find a good healthcare practitioner that you can work with. I love integrated doctors. I mean, have you guys had much experience with integrated doctors?
I used to train them years ago.
So, integrated doctors are fantastic because they've got a very broad understanding. If you need something short-term, antibiotics and all the rest of it to arrest it, great. Now, I'll argue that there could be natural compounds that you could use, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, and it comes down to your belief, your theory, I guess, in terms of life and all the rest of it. But certainly, naturopaths and other things like that obviously can help as well too. Even some of the clinical nutritionists and dietitians, depending on what other training that they've done, can also be really good and help with that as well too. So. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right. It's a complex condition, but it's a wide-reaching condition, SIBO. So, it can get to your brain, get to your heart, of course, your bowels. So it can cause you to affect your motor movements with regards to things like dopaminergic disorders, like good old Parkinson's. I mean, you wonder, like the millions of people that have been affected with Parkinson's, they just picked that one. How many of them is it caused by the bacteria in the gut? There was a study done here, in this side now, where they actually did a fecal transplant on people with Parkinson's, and their symptoms improved.
Wow.
So, that was very recent. So there's something going on there.
So the fecal transplant is literally taking someone's healthy stool and putting it into somebody else.
Exactly. They politically correctly call them crapshules. I know. I don't know if we're allowed to say that, but that's what they call them.
Yeah, well, if that's what they call them, right?
They call them crapshules because it's capsulated
crap.
That's it. That's the word I was looking for.
Well, there you go. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Again, it just goes to show, like, as far as medicine is concerned, that there's a lot of interesting fringe things out there which actually may benefit.
Absolutely.
So in terms of, just quickly before we move out of diet, is there anything else? So remove the kombuchas, yogurts, other bacterial loaded products, I'd say stay away from. Don't take the probiotics. Now, I reckon that would be a major trap. I reckon if you went out to people with SIBO, if they didn't know that it was they just thought it was gut health issues, I reckon there'd be a large percentage if they're into natural medicine that would be self-diagnosing, going, hey, I need some probiotics.
Absolutely. And a lot of those probiotics also contain prebiotics, like inulin and stuff like that.
Fibers.
So typically, people with SIBO do worse on inulin, prebiotics, probiotics, fibers, and things like that. Their bloating gets worse. They feel worse. The brain fog increases. So in a way, if anyone out there is taking products like this and it makes them feel worse, it's just a nice way of kind of like, I guess, making you aware that, I probably have SIBO and maybe I need to go and get a breath test done and look at this a little bit further.
And so natural ways then in terms of treating SIBO, is there anything specific that you would recommend?
Well, I get great results with herbal treatments, various herbs. I think there is a study that Steve may have on berberine.
Yeah, berberine. I don't know if you've got it, but berberine's very good because it, of course, it increases akkermansia in the gut very well. Yep. So it's a good one more for normalising the gut function. There was a study here done on what they termed a therapeutic diet, which is not a very good, it's actually just free amino acids.
Wow.
Mm.
And they just gave amino acids to these people, 100% amino acids, and 85% of them got better.
How long? How long were
14 days.
Wow. But
So I know it's extreme. And
I wonder how that would go if you just went for a fast for 14 days. Now, I've had friends of mine that have fasted for longer than that.
Really?
Yeah, I've done 3 days. That's as long as I could go.
Yeah.
So, and that was tough. But in terms of fasting as well too, I think that should definitely be something. Definitely
intermittent fasting. Absolutely.
Fasting,
You need that 90 to 120 minutes a day at least to have that migrating motor complex work, right? So that's as simple as, if you think about it, let's say you have breakfast at 8. You don't really want to have anything else to eat until about 11, 12. Now that sounds easy enough, but how many people have snacks in between?
Not for our figure and fitness competitors. Typically they're eating every 3 hours.
Yeah.
And they want to be getting some source of protein in to maintain body composition. Also, and it's funny because I think you guys dispelled this in a podcast around fat loss, that regular consumption of food made no difference to overall body composition as opposed to total amount of calories consumed in the day.
Yeah.
So this regular eating thing is actually a bit of a misnomer. Now, specifically if you're looking at different proteins releasing over different periods of time, this whole thing around protein timing, protein release, calcium caseinate, which, we've always been a big advocate against, crossing the blood-brain barrier and the amount of, other issues that casein has. Steve, you hate dairy from all sources anyway. I'm not quite as hardcore as you, but but I have mitigated most of the dairy out of my diet now. But these sorts of things, if you put them together as a picture, become, I think, for a lot of people a bit overwhelming. But if you understand what you can and can't, one man's meat's another man's poison. This is where you're talking about probiotics and kombucha and other things like that. Some people absolutely brilliant, for other people not. And this is where you've got to work out theranostics really, which is what do you need? Now, there's a lot of companies out there selling, we're going to do gene testing and we're going to do this and, we're going to discover your MTHFR and all that sort of stuff, which probably not so important really, because you can overcome a lot of that. But the one test or the testing that I think probably could be very beneficial, and again, coming back with a lot of the research that you guys are finding, and again, back to that old ancient wisdom, is that health starts in the gut, is probably looking at getting some gut testing done. So, that can tell you a lot about yourself and about what sort of foods you should and shouldn't be eating, and potentially what other treatments through help with your practitioner you should be using as well.
Absolutely.
So.
It's incredible because, as I said, the gut microbiome contains more cells than the human body, way more genes, about 100 times more genes are in your bowels than there is in your body.
Right.
So, people talk about gene testing, they're testing 1% of their genes, which is the ones in their body. The ones in their bowels, there's 99%. Now, they produce loads of chemicals that affect systemically throughout the body as well. So I don't know why people don't test for them. It's incredible.
So, again, if we looked at it from a point of view, and if people listening to this podcast, they, maybe they know that they've got SIBO, maybe they're concerned that they may have it. If you're going to start anywhere in terms of if you've got problems and you really just can't get on top of them, starting with some gut analysis of some sort, going to a healthcare practitioner and saying, look, I want to look at my gut, I want to look at these sorts of things, that could be a great place to start.
Absolutely. So stool testing, breath testing. So stool testing is not a diagnosis of SIBO, but it can certainly give you an idea of your microbial diversity, what's growing, what's not growing, right? And
sorry. Keep going.
I feel a dirty thought
No,
here.
it's not a dirty thought. I'm just laughing over when we did the stool testing analysis that Tony, myself, and John and Matt did, way back in the day. And oh my gosh, like John, one of the guys that used to work for us, he's got doilies on his toilet seat. I mean, it's like who has, when you used to go to grandma's place and there'd be like this fluffy cover.
The knitted.
It'd be like, I'd be looking at that and then on the ground they've got like these really fluffy shag pile carpets in your bathroom.
In your toilet.
And it's like, man, you've just got to make sure I could never do it. I mean, I've got a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old, and seriously, if they get 50% into the toilet, I'm like, yes, winning, right? It's like you walk in there, it's like, did you have a bath in here? Like, what's going on?
It's like on the walls. It's
like those movies where you walk in and it goes dun 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 dun. It's like, oh my gosh. Anyway, it smells like a public. Yeah, it is. It's bits of. No, I'm not going to talk about that. But John's sitting there and like he comes in and he goes, yeah. I said, did you do the test? He's like, yeah, did it, but I got in trouble. I'm like, how did you get in trouble? He's like, well, I dropped the tray and I got. Well, okay, we'll just wipe it up. That's not a problem.
That's gotta be
I'm like,
burned.
what were you doing holding it, Steve? Like, he's holding this tray, and then he's got this little like ice cream scoopy thing that you have with it as well too. That you got to. It's glamorous. It's glamorous, right? I mean, it's just like, anyway, it's
improved since then, though.
It's horrible. Well, Steve, you're ruining the punchline, but that's exactly right. But he's sitting there and I'm like, what happened? He goes, well, I dropped it and then it got on the shag pile carpet. It's not shag pile. I call it the shag pile carpet. And it got all over the doily, all over the seat. And he goes, and my wife was very unhappy. I'm like, man, seriously, you are doing it wrong. But the good news is now, it's like a smear. Right, you can use a smear.
Much easier.
Look, it sounds disgusting, but in terms of, would you rather get a little? Look, this is just how it works, right? I mean, and this is maybe why people don't do it. But it used to be you used to crap in this little paper boat, and then you used to dig around with a little scoop and then it's disgusting, right? I'm sorry. Now it's like, okay, effectively it's like wiping your butt and then you put that tissue into a thing and then that's it, it's done. Yeah. So it's so easy. I mean, I just want to be graphic, but because a lot of people probably have gone, I'm not digging around with the boat and a popsicle scoop, right? So it's a lot better than that now.
It is, and we learned a new medical term the other day in one of our Zoom chats called clean snapper.
Yes.
Now, do you want to explain to people what a clean snapper is?
I know what a clean snapper is. That's where you clench your butt cheeks and you.
It's kind of.
Is it?
It's
and you snap it off clean.
And so nothing on the paper, and that's a problem because that's when you have to go digging around. But typically, not many people are clean snappers, as we learn.
I'm going to get a T-shirt made up.
I'm a clean snapper.
I'm a clean snapper. Oh, man.
Elizabeth was going, what's a clean snapper? And I'm going, it's a type of fish that swims. No.
Well, I mean, there'd be no need for those bidets. I mean, I'll have to have that bidet that I have in my house removed now. You know what? I hate it when I go to places and they don't have bidets.
What's bidets? Oh, bidets.
Oh, bidet. They're French. Yeah.
Bidets is like
days. Birthday days. Well, I feel like it's my birthday when I get to use a bidet. How's that?
Yes.
It's like water splashing.
It cleans your
Yes. No, I know what it is. I just did not know the pronunciation.
Yeah. So, what, you don't have a bidet in your house?
No.
Oh,
I'm not fancy.
You're a peasant.
I know I'm a peasant.
Using paper.
What? That's like
yes.
Wipers?
Wipers.
No?
That was a movie. What was the movie?
That was Coming to America.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
good.
That's
so good.
One.
I love it.
Might know it.
I love it. Don't watch the second one. It's terrible. The second one. What talk about how to trash a great film. Anyway.
Yeah, there you go.
Anyway.
Boy. So we've talked about stool sampling. I think that's getting towards the end of the podcast when we start talking about poo a lot, isn't it?
I think it is.
Usually.
It is. Anyway, is there anything else that you guys wanted to finish up on and mention?
I don't think so.
No, I've cut those things together. It really is just showing you that the small intestine itself can have such a massive systemic effect. And if you've got a systemic disease, consider the bowel. There's not many that it doesn't. Your head, your heart.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And I'll probably add to that just treating the bacteria, just taking an antimicrobial, whether it's a antibiotic or herbal, without fixing the causes such as oral health or chronic stress or low stomach acid or whatever, it's not going to get you far because you'll end up with the same problem a few months later.
The medical term is a towel on a turd. So you don't want to put a towel on a turd. You want to get a doggy bag and scoop that thing up and get rid of it.
Just get the grease pointing out.
I don't know. That's terrible. I'm running with it. But yeah, you want to treat the root of the problem as opposed to just throw a towel on a turd.
That's right.
Brooklyn's killing herself laughing. You're supposed to be the producer.
Yeah.
And you just act professionally. My gosh, it's so difficult.
Snigger in the background.
I know. Snigger. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Yep.
Again, get tested. If you're just having frustrations, don't keep plodding on and expecting a different result. That's the definition of insanity. Go get tested. Go get your gut tested. Have a look into some of these, SIBO tests and stuff like that. Whether it's the measuring of the breath test, or whether it's through using a stool sample analysis, which is so much less invasive than what it used to be. That could be a great place to start.
Great, absolutely.
Anyway, thanks, guys.
No worries.
And
Thank you.
We'll be back with more soon.
See you next week.